Welcome to the Genius Talk podcast. I'm your host Atul Raj from the bestemailmarketer.com, and today we have Chris Heivly with us. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I can't wait for our little discussion here.
Okay, so for our listeners who don't know you, can you tell them who you are and what do you do?
Well, my funny little answer I usually give is that I cause trouble. What do? I cause trouble wherever I go. I'm an instigator. Someone introduced me as a serial instigator. What that means, entrepreneur, investor, ran accelerator programs. Now I care a lot about how startup communities get built and thrive. Mostly, if you really want to go meta on it, I'd like to help people live their dreams.
That's very cool. Okay, so looking back, what was the turning point of MapQuest that put it on the path to 1.2 billion exit?
Yeah, what was the breaking point? I don't know if we had one. I can tell you that we had the advantage back in the day of being first out there, first mover advantage, we used to call that. And we were smart enough to recognize that and not let it go for as long as possible. And, there was no such thing as data centers or, there wasn't, email marketing or any of that stuff. It was just, we were a little bit lucky, maybe earned luck in terms of getting our product out there first. And then we were a bunch of cartographers, I will tell you, and geographers. So we knew kind of what people wanted to see and how they wanted to get it displayed. So maybe that was our advantage. And then, and I'll tell you, Atul, it just took off like crazy.
Hey, I just got the notification that our interview will start after 5 minutes. So I guess I was too excited and I texted you before.
It's good. We're here, right? That's all that counts.
Yeah. Okay, so what did the process of negotiating the sale to AOL teaches you about business strategy and deal making?
So I have to be honest to say that at the time of the sale, for the sale to AOL, it was actually a public company. So we went public in 1999. And I do have to say that I had left the company and left the board of directors right before that. I was 34, 35 years old at the time, was one of the founders, had lots of different roles. But, what I'll share with you is that when you go public, they wanted adults on the board. They wanted people with names and experiences and such. And not just at that age, that wasn't me. So so I wasn't part of the quote unquote strategy per se, other than that AOL bought it off the public markets, and they could do that a couple different ways. But the idea at the time that I was aware of, still had pretty good inside knowledge, was that AOL was the big dog, right? They were the Google, they were the Facebook of that era. And, it was a chance to basically do it bigger and better than we had done it as a small little company.
Okay. So if you could go back to the MapQuest days and do one thing differently, what would it be?
There's actually quite a number of things. One of the things, and you just didn't know better at the time, but what we were doing is enabling other people's sites to have maps as part of them, right? So for instance, like like things we take for granted today, Marriott hotels on their website saying, hey, I'd like to show people like where our hotels are, or Starbucks or whatever. The sense of location, the geography, the mapping, like that's what we were all, I mean, I'm a bachelor's and master's degree in geography, right? So I understand, what spatial data looks like and how you're supposed to kind of integrate it with others. So what I'll tell you is that there was no such concept as the API at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to make a custom API for every single customer that we work with. So in hindsight, we probably could have done that a little bit better and smarter and come up with a standard API before someone told us that we had to do it.
Okay.
That's a product thing. Yeah. I mean, we were just hanging on for dear life, to be honest with you.
Okay. So you go ahead. You're saying something. Okay. So I'm curious, for service-based business, is it better to only sell one services or sell one service or have multiple services?
So that's a great question. And I'll answer not just from my own experiences, from the experiences of helping thousands of entrepreneurs for the last 15 years. I'm personally more like a crawl, walk, run, like incremental growth kind of
Mhm.
person. And so to that end, I think it's really important early on to focus on one service or one product or one small set of features that really address a problem. I think trying to do too much too early, you either hit nobody or you hit everyone, and neither one of those is good in the early days when you're limited to time and funds.
Yeah. Actually, that's what's happening with my company because we are getting too much work and
Sometimes it's what you say no to is as
yeah.
important as what you say yes to. And I'm personally, I just think people should not try to do too much too fast.
Okay. So I should only focus on one service and later scale to multiple.
Yeah. Maybe one at a time, things
Mhm.
that are adjacent to the service you're offering, things that give you permission to move to other areas as opposed to leaps, right?
Okay, okay. So, what advice do you give to founders who have doubt about fundraising, pitching, or building teams?
Well, there's 3 good questions in that one question, so let's break them down. If you're not comfortable with fundraising, make sure you talk to lots of people who've been through fundraising to understand what that feels like and what your expectations should be. Fundraising isn't for every company and every idea. I'm not adverse. I've bootstrapped many companies myself. The concept that I teach early, first time entrepreneurs is usually, hey, raising funds is okay, but you should use funds to expand what you're doing today or go faster. And you can't do that if you don't haven't answered some basic questions yet. So sometimes people fundraise too early, which then goes to your second question is what would I tell you about a pitch? Well, if you don't have anything to say, it's hard to fundraise it. So you do have to learn how to talk to investors, what their expectations are. Don't be angry at their expectations. Understand their expectations. They're in business for themselves, right? They have a very simple business model. I take a dollar from somebody and I give it to someone else, give that dollar, and I hope to get $10 in return. So if you don't understand that, then you should not take funds from someone else. And what was the third part of your question? Do you remember?
Yeah.
It's
What
all right. We'll
advice
come
do you
back to it.
give to founders about team building?
About team building.
Yeah.
Yeah, frankly, that's the most important, many times more important than fundraising. Um, you know, like just founding team, and then there's kind of the rest of your team. One of the hints I give to people, and by the way, I failed at this myself, where I've hooked up with some co-founders or some team members only to realize some weeks or months in, wow, that we're not a fit. We don't think the same way. We problem solve the same way. We don't have the same vision for the arc of the company. And when that happens, you better fix that or you're in trouble. It's eventually going to come out. So my advice is to spend as much time dating your founders and your team members, find projects to work on that are outside of the business. I always say, go build a Habitat for Humanity, volunteer for that for a weekend and build a house together, be assigned tasks and see how each other reacts to that. And at the end of that, say, is that the kind of person I want to basically give my life to? Right. Yeah, as a
Mhm.
co-founder. In terms of team building and adding team members, there's an old adage that says hire slow and fire fast. And, I think it's important to know what you want, be able to articulate that, and then test that with your team members early on to make sure, they're a good fit. And hopefully you can test that before you actually hire them. So you don't have to go through that pain, but find ways to really sync up on what you believe and what responsibilities each one of us has. And hopefully you'll do a better job than not.
Okay. So, what's the hardest decision you have ever made as a business owner?
I think the hardest thing is to shut something down and to say, this doesn't have the potential that I thought it had when I started. And, it's one of the most often asked questions is how do I know it's time? And I say, I can't answer that. Only you know that. But maybe the path to finding out that answer for yourself is to gather as much data as possible. And that data could be customers or customer engagement of your product or whatever, get it outside your own head. But once you kind of see the handwriting on the wall, you either have to pivot or shut it down. And That's difficult because they're like our children. There's like these little babies that you're kind of birthing and growing, and then, basically you're saying, "Yeah, it's not I don't think it's gonna work."
Okay, so what are some KPIs or milestone that you have found that truly matters for startup founders?
Another great question, and I'm a big fan. I'm gonna channel my inner Y Combinator who believes that early on you should have one metric and one metric only. They usually use sales growth or user growth as the only metric that they judge their startups by. I don't think it has to be as rigid as that, but I do say at different stages of building a company, you should have one metric that really drives what you want to have happen. And the way that I ask the entrepreneurs I work with to think about it is think 3 months ahead and say, what one thing, if I'm standing, so here we are, let's pretend it's October 1st. I know it's like the 12th or something, but I can't do that math. So let's say it's the 15th. So November 15th, December 15th, January 15th. It's January 15th. I'm sitting here today. I'm now thinking about January. What do I want to know that gives me the data that says I should keep working? That's the one metric you should rally around, right? Maybe it's, I want to be able to talk and have 50 customer interviews, right? Which aren't about selling your product, it's interviewing customers. Maybe that's something that's really early on in the process. Or maybe it's later on when we have our product ready, maybe it's making 50 sales, right? Or maybe, so I'm a big fan of choosing one metric in the first few years and rallying, by the way, back to team building, rallying everyone on the team to understand that that's the one metric we're going to judge our success and validation on.
So you read a lot of books, right? So what's your favorite one?
That's like asking what your favorite child is. I'll give you a couple. So way after I had been an entrepreneur, and this has got to be coming up on 10, 12 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, Eric Ries's Lean Startup really changed for many of us how you view being an entrepreneur and a founder, especially kind of a tech oriented founder. And so it's the one book I still recommend that people read like 3 times before they start a company. And it's really a mindset that's really anchored to kind of the last 10 years than maybe the way that you assumed entrepreneurship happened 30, 40 years ago, like when I started. So that's one of my favorites. Let me see if there's not, you know what? Let's look at the book list. Crossing the Chasm was my Bible back in the day. That's kind of the lean startup of the 1980s. Running Lean by Ash Mora and chapter 6, which talks about how to do a customer interview. I probably recommend 3 times a week to the entrepreneurs I still deal with. I'm, Atul, I'm really interested, and my strength is really in what I call the 0 to 1. After that, there's tons of books, but there seems to be very few books about how do I get an idea out of my head and start to kind of put the pieces in place. So those Running Lean and Lean Startup are two of my favorites in that regard.
What about your book?
Well, they're beautiful little babies, aren't they?
Yes.
So I've been lucky enough to write 2 books so far. The first one is kind of in that 0 to 1, kind of how to start anything. And I share some experiences, personal experiences that I hope people can rally behind. And then just a few years ago, I released my second book, which is around how startup communities get built and how, as a founder, it would behoove you to lean into your startup community to go faster, better, all those things to grow your company better. But it's also for people who are interested in helping to build their ecosystem, right? Economic development folks, university executives, corporations, government, and founders and investors, right? How do they all come together in a way? So those are the 2 books I've written so far. Maybe a
Okay, and
third one coming soon. We'll see.
okay, we are waiting for that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think? How much is mindset important for a business to succeed?
Well, I use the word mindset about every other sentence these days, and I think it's everything. I think kind of how you approach things, how you process things, which is all based on your mindset, what kind of knowledge feeds into that mindset. And I think most people come at this thing, entrepreneurship, with many times the wrong mindset. And so that's what I try to shift through, speaking, through writing, my blog, one-on-one meetings that I still hold, multiple times a week. It's really kind of getting kind of your approach down. And I think if you get that right, not that it's going to be easier per se, but I think you have more chances of success when you have the right mindset.
So, what do you think? What most business owners get wrong when it comes to mindset?
Repeat the question.
What what is the most common mindset that is holding business owner behind?
Yeah. So, let me reframe it. What's the wrong mindset? I think the
Yeah.
wrong mindset is, and some of the things you and I were talking about before we got started, trying to do too much too fast, trying to scale a business before you have product market fit,
Uh-huh.
trying to, raising money too fast, hiring a team too fast, before you really kind of understand the problem and what you're trying to, or the opportunity and what other people think about it. Uh, I think the other mindset is things like that you have to think you have to be the smartest person in the room. By the way, I'm never the smartest person in the room, but I'm a great listener and I'm a great processor of other people's information. I love to hear lots of disparate views of things and then take that and distill that into my own decision. So I think sometimes business builders think they have to have every answer, and man, what a burden to carry around, right? So that's kind of a wrong mindset, especially when it comes to fundraising, by the way. Yeah, I'll stop there. There's a ton of
Okay.
other stuff buried in that though, but
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
the way, self-awareness, vulnerability, etc.
Yes. Okay. So you are a writer. Okay. So what do you have to say about being a perfectionist?
A perfect what?
A perfectionist who want everything perfect.
Phrase the question a different way because I'm not getting the gist.
Okay. Suppose someone is writing something, okay, and he have written that, but he's not promoting it or not sharing it, and just keep writing different drafts because he think it's not perfect.
Yeah, well, I think it's Voltaire's quote that says, perfect is the enemy of the good. And I've never been someone who understands that I'm ever going to achieve any kind of perfection. I'm a big fan of good or good enough. And when it comes to my writing, what I'm going to tell you, Atul, is that I failed, freshman English, in college. I was told in high school that I was a terrible writer. And it really wasn't until I got to graduate school that one of my professors sat down and gave me a couple little lessons about how to write. And so I think I've made up with, 500 blog posts and 275 Inc. magazine articles and 2 books. I think I figured out. And, what I'll tell you is that here's the little secret. The reason there's no perfect is that as a reader, your perfect is different than another reader's perfect. We're all reading this, coming at it from our perspective, wanting to get what we want to get out of something. And so we all bring our own interpretation. So how can you draft a perfect sentence or I don't know how many thousands of sentences in a book? That's an impossible task. And so I think I heard someone say this once that I've really taken to heart. I almost write the book for me and hopes that others like it. So if it passes my test, if I can understand, if I've shared with you an idea that I want you to kind of really embody, then I've like check. I can move on.
Okay, that was really helpful. Okay, so for our listeners who want to connect with you or want to learn more about you, read your book, join your email list, where can they go?
So my website is www.heivly.com. Heivly is my last name, spelled Heiv as in Victor Ly. So Heivly.com, I have 500 or 600 blog posts on there, references to the 2 books. But you can also sign up for open office hours off my website. I give kind of an hour and a half a week, 20 minutes each, to anybody who wants to sign up for their 20 minutes. We'll do a video chat just like you and I are doing today. And we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. That's, by the way, people go, why do you do that? Why do you give your time? And I'm like, because I learn from every one of you, right? I get to stay current and learn. And this ends up being the fuel for writing blog posts and books and such. So that's the best way to connect with me. Or come see
Great.
me speak somewhere. I still pretty heavy on the speaking circuit, somewhere between 8 and probably 12 gigs a year.
Okay, okay. Is there anything else that you would like to share?
What I would like to say, hey, you know what? If you got an idea for something, give it some air. Get it outside your head. Start sharing it with other people. That's rule 1 of my first book, and they're all called Build the Fort. They're a series. Build the Fort references kind of channeling your inner 10-year-old and kind of shedding yourself of all these adult thing crap that we bring to the equation. But rule 1 is just go out and share the idea with as many people as possible. You'd be amazed at what starts to come back to you. And out of that starts maybe getting a little bit of confidence, momentum about where to take this idea that you've had in your head.
Okay, that's great. Chris, thank you so much for spending some time with us. It was really lovely and fun chatting with you.
It was my pleasure.